Just a few more people trickling in. We'll give them just a little bit longer. All right, Steve, I'm making the time as 9:31, and if you could keep a watch on the people coming in so that we don't miss anybody in the waiting room, we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. This is the March 19th, 2021 SEDA-COG MPO meeting. Thank you for joining us this morning. Just a couple of reminders at the top of the meeting. First off, as we mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, the meeting is being recorded and the recording will be posted to our website after the meeting. A link to the advanced packet was sent out in an email by Steve on last Friday. So we won't bring most of the items up on screen. We'll assume that you have access to them because we know some of you are coming in via just a phone, and we'll reference to the items using page numbers to keep you up to date and where we're looking in the packet. We are going to start off today with a presentation on the PennDOT Pathways program, so we appreciate Mr. Shiflett joining us for that. And then we front-loaded the action items. We are looking at a 10-minute recess still because it is going to be a reasonably long meeting, and we look for that to fall probably right around 11 o'clock, and then we're still hoping to be done by 11:30 or 11:40 this morning. Just a couple of courtesy items. You've heard all these from us before. Please mute your mics when not in use. Please introduce yourself when giving a motion or a second or asking a question. And just a couple of new members joining us this morning. Our habit has always been when we have new people in the room to go around and do a set of introductions. Since we're all on a conference call, that isn't really very practical. But I just wanted to point out we've got a couple new people joining us. Mark Schultz, who is the interim planning and programming contact for District 2. And also we are joined by Kim Wheeler this morning, our new executive director here at SEDA-COG.
Morning, Jim. Thank you. Good to see all of you.
All right, good morning. So with those quick items out of the way, that'll move us on to item B of the agenda, the public forum. Is there anyone attending the meeting for the purpose of providing comment on an item not listed on the agenda? All right, then hearing none, we're going to move right on to item C. This is a presentation on the PennDOT Pathways Initiative. It's by Larry Shiflett, the PennDOT Deputy Secretary for Planning. If the name sounds familiar to some of you that have been here for with us for a long time, if you think back, Larry's been able to join us at some of our meetings going back a few years in his previous role, overseeing the program center. But on Jim Ritzman's retirement, Larry succeeded him as the PennDOT Deputy Secretary for Planning. So, Larry, thank you for taking the time. Looks like you're working through the share process.
Yep, hang tight while I'm getting that up and running. I'll say thanks for having me, Mr. Saylor, and Kim, congratulations. I just need to make sure I get the right thing up here. I don't think anybody wants to see my list of emails or any of that nonsense. So again, bear with me. And
Thanks, Larry.
Yep, sure thing. And thanks for the opportunity to present today. Obviously, this has been a hot topic for a few months, but even more so in the last month or so. Not able to see it yet, right, Jim?
We're not seeing it yet. It looked like you were headed in the right direction, that you had the share going, but it was just a matter of which window you were clicking on your desktop.
Got it. Well, maybe I should close all my other windows and that'll help.
Got a little bit going on in the background of mine too. I understand.
Apologize for the delay.
That's all right. And just as a programming note for the members, what we've been talking about is that we'd share the slides from Mr. Shiflett's presentation in the follow-up email to this. And we have just a couple of other items that we'll probably include in that as well. And we'll hit further down the agenda. There we go.
Looking good now?
Looking good.
Let me pull up full screen and we'll get going. There we go. All right. Even us who've been at it for a year still continue to have issues with some of the technology. So again, apologize for the short delay. Thanks for having me today. Obviously, as I said, this is a hot topic. It's a topic in my 29 years at PennDOT that sort of ebb and flows. You have a successful funding package, and 5 to 8 to 10 years later, when you don't think you need to talk about it again, well, you have to talk about it again. So here we are. Certainly due in large part to the eroding value of the gas tax and uncertainty in future funding at federal and the state level. Our investment needs continue to outgrow the current funding that we do receive. The gap gets worse every year that goes by if we don't address that. And that's why we launched a new program, which is called PennDOT Pathways. Through the program, we're looking to analyze new future-focused sources of funding for transportation that could better serve our communities and all of Pennsylvania well into the future. So again, things that are hopefully going to set us up to be successful, not just tomorrow or next year, but a longer term solution. PennDOT, and this is certainly a slide I always like to show, we have a huge responsibility. We support every mode of transportation in the state, from roads and bridges to ports, bike lanes, but right now one of our major needs is on the highway and bridge side of our program. It falls on us to make travel reliable and safe, and when I say us, we have such a strong partnership and relationship with the MPOs and the RPOs in our state. That us includes everybody on the meeting today and the other 23 planning partners throughout the state as well. So again, means we have to maintain and restore and expand nearly 40,000 miles, and this is just a state-owned system, as well as 25,400 bridges. Those bridges have an average life of about 50 years. And the local system, equally as important, has more miles, maybe not as many bridges, but certainly has needs as well. Just to give you a snapshot of the system, ours is one of the largest state-owned systems in the country. Matter of fact, we have the 5th largest state-maintained road system and the 3rd largest state-maintained bridge system in the nation. Our system is far larger than any of our surrounding states, and one of the facts that I like to use, it's comparable in size to the state-maintained road systems of New York, New Jersey, and all of New England. So basically anything to our north and east, you combine all those states, and our state-maintained system is larger than all those states combined. So again, huge responsibility. Just a brief update, so break down where the funding comes for highways and bridges. We do have some revenues that are collected from licensing, general fund, and our federal funds, but our largest source of revenue, as you can see here, 74% comes from state and the federal gas tax. We're extraordinarily dependent on the gas tax. And as I mentioned earlier, that's not a sustainable future. The funds are generated every time somebody fills up their gas tank. So I think we talked about this in the past too, but just at somewhere along the line in 2019, the Transportation Advisory Committee did produce a report that identified 6 major risks to our overall funding on the transportation side. The 2 largest at the time were federal funding and the gas tax. And now after the pandemic, COVID-19, we have new challenges, and that challenge the way our system, people utilize our system and how frequently they utilize the system. And the bottom line there is that current and future funding is at risk. And just to hit on the gas tax, certainly the good news, people are using less gas, so fuel efficiency is great for the environment and for our pockets. The bad news on that front is people are using less gas, which means we're collecting less gas tax revenues. Federal funding, just the unpredictable nature of it. Much of the federal funding as well is based on gas tax, and inflation is also a factor here. The federal gas tax hasn't been raised since 1993, so 27 plus years ago. If you put that in perspective, again, it depends what cup of coffee you're getting, but an average cup of coffee in 1993 was about 75 cents, and that now costs about $1.59. So inflation caused that cup of coffee to go up. And no different in the transportation industry, inflation has also raised the cost of construction materials. $1 today certainly buys less concrete than it once did, less asphalt than it once did. In fact, the cost of construction materials in general has gone up 140% over the past 30 years. As a result, Federal Highway Trust Fund doesn't provide the funding that is needed for the national infrastructure, not just Pennsylvania. And without some sort of change, there's significant uncertainty in future funding available for the states. As a result, Congress has been supplementing the Federal Highway Trust Fund with general funds. For this current federal fiscal year, about $13.6 billion in general funds had to be put into the Federal Highway Trust Fund just to keep it solvent and make payments to the states. So obviously that bailout is something that's not sustainable and can't continue as well. And then the third and the newest challenge, and it's been a challenge for everything that we do in our lives, but in regards to transportation, it's certainly impacted our budget. Vehicle miles traveled initially dropped 40% in the spring of 2020, and while it has come back, at least for passenger vehicles, we're at about 85% of where we normally would expect to be. This could continue to have a lasting impact on our economy, how we work, where we work, when and how we go to school. So all those things with the telework over the last year, the way we're conducting meetings today, I'd much rather be there certainly in person and filling my gas tank up on the way up or the way home. But our estimate is that the pandemic will continue to contribute to revenue losses, at least in the near future. And right now, if you look at it from March of 2020, when this all started, to right around the end of February, I think was the last estimate, we're about $504 million in lost revenues. Again, all due to less travel, less filling up at the pump. The other big thing, I mentioned fuel efficiency. Well, gas taxes certainly have become less predictable source of revenue across the country. As that fuel efficiency becomes better, we also have the influx of electric vehicle technologies, and that continues to evolve. And earlier this calendar year, it really started to drive home when most of the major automakers announced their plans to have a good selection of their models, or in some cases, all of their models, with the option for electric or to go fully electric. I know General Motors has announced that they plan to have all models electric by 2035. And that, that sounds like it's a long way away, but when we were talking about Act 89, I mentioned that the risk is funding, there was also a funding report done by STC and the Transportation Funding Advisory Committee. It announced a gap of funding, and that gap was going to be about 7.9 or so billion, 7.2 maybe it was, by 2020. And at the time, that was in 2010, 2011. 2020 sounded a long ways away. Well, we're in 2021. So again, time really does tick by quickly. So that GM in 2035, and I think one of the other dealerships, and I didn't change the slide, and I forget which one it is, had another announcement this week to do a similar thing and bump up, going to mostly electric in a fairly near future in that 10 or so year time period. So certainly an impact. Obviously, they aren't going to the pump to fill up. This is a slide I really like. Another thing that we have to consider as taxpayers and consumers, we pay for quality of life services in many different needs and forms. This slide here certainly shows, and I'd like to call out the cell phone bill. That includes costs for services that we expect to receive, but you also have to take into account the funding that's required to get the infrastructure in place to receive the services and deliver that service, such as the towers, maintenance, and the fiber optic cable. In transportation, it's no different. For example, in PA, a single driver pays on average, as you can see on the far right there, about $380 a year in gas tax. And when you look at some of these other utility type and service type costs that we're all paying, that's pretty low considering we depend largely on the transportation system, almost, if not much more than most of these other services. In fact, we pay less for transportation than we do for many of these other important services that contribute to our quality of life. And certainly you get what you pay for, most cases. I may have to argue that on the cable and the internet and things. But there's the internet and those things certainly have become ever more important, as well as we're all teleworking and doing virtual things. All right, so the consequences of doing nothing, obviously PennDOT, as I mentioned, we owned and operate 25,400 plus bridges across the state. About 2,500 of those bridges are rated in poor condition. For many of us that have been around for a while, formerly known as structurally deficient. And Pennsylvania currently ranks number 2 in the country for the number of bridges in poor condition. We've come a long way, however, since 2008, when at the time we had an all-time high of 6,000, and we were number 1 in the nation for bridges in poor condition. Today, our current highway and bridge funding needs, as you can see, are $15 billion annually. You can see here, our annual budget for highway and bridge is about $6.9 billion, which certainly is a significant amount of money, but that shortfall is about $8.1 billion, if you do some simple math there, to get us to, again, some basic asset management, cleaning up the bottlenecks and those types of things throughout the state. Budget shortfalls impact everyone. Obviously, all of us on the call today, as well as businesses across Pennsylvania, as well as the goods and services on which we all rely, and ever more so rely, I'd say, in the last 12 plus months, and having them delivered right to your door. Every year, driving on roads that aren't in a state of good repair costs each of us about $550 in fuel and car maintenance. Also up to about 62 hours of delay each year in some areas. And that obviously impacts quality of life, availability to get to soccer practice, to a meeting, and all those things. In some cases, excessive detours, traffic jams, out of the way driving routes certainly impact our air quality as well. If we have properly funded roadway systems, and make the connections that we need. It gives us good access to agriculture, resources, job centers, and manufacturing, which is incredibly important to the economic engine in Pennsylvania. It improves that overall economic competitiveness as well, and can provide for higher standards of living. Each year, the trucking industry, just to give you a sense, is impacted by driving underfunded routes as well. In Pennsylvania, we have 6 of the top 100 bottlenecks for trucks in the United States. So that's tied, I think, for number 5 in the country. And that certainly impacts the bottom line. It costs truck drivers about 14.2 million hours of delays each year across the state. In addition, if funding continues to reduce, our national highway system bridges may need to be posted with weight restrictions. That would also have a costly impacts to trucks with detours. In 2019, just to give you an example, we had about 30 weight restricted bridges on the national highway system, and we're looking to avoid any future postings. So what is PennDOT Pathways? To get into this a little bit more, to support PennDOT Pathways, we're looking at an alternative funding, planning, and environmental linkage study. So look, we love abbreviations at PennDOT, so that's a PEL study. That PEL study is underway to identify both near and long-term funding solutions and establish a methodology for their evaluation. One of the early findings that has come out of the PEL study is that tolling of major bridges is one viable near-term solution to funding their reconstruction and or replacement. To advance the funding alternative, PennDOT's simultaneously pursuing this first initiative of the PennDOT Pathways program, which is the Major Bridge P3 initiative. That's the one I'd say that's gotten the most attention in the last 30 days or so, for sure. Again, what is the PEL, the Planning and Environmental Linkage? Again, it's an opportunity for us to study solutions that can work for Pennsylvania. Our challenge today is to look for funding options that allow us to work together to continue to create the best transportation system for our communities, as I mentioned earlier, now and well into the future. So some sustainability there. We're currently evaluating the funding strategies that you see up here. Some of these options might work better in certain scenarios and locations than others. It's important that we study funding options and we consider how different strategies could work together for, again, both that near and long-term solution. And just, I'll hit on each one of these real briefly. Bridge tolling, that's sort of self-explanatory. It's a collection of a toll from the drivers passing over that particular bridge structure. We'll go to the slide to the right, manage lanes. They're dedicated lanes on an expressway where you have traffic managed for a reliable journey. Traffic can be managed by charging a toll or requiring carpooling. It gives drivers a choice to pay a fee or to carpool for a more reliable trip, or just utilize the regular lanes. Next to the right there, congestion pricing. This is a use of a toll as well on a corridor where regular, recurring, and persistent congestion exists, and thus typically implemented in the more urbanized areas. The toll would be variable or dynamic and change based on traffic congestion. For example, the toll would be higher during more congested periods, reducing the number of vehicles that would select the toll route. This is something that is in place on I-95 in the Northern Virginia area. Corridor tolling, this is a scenario which all the lanes on an interstate or an expressway would be tolled. Benefits of this strategy are that it spreads the tolls throughout the state and results in all users paying for the facility that they're actually using. This approach could be implemented through also what's known as a road user charge or mileage-based user fee as well. And then that's the last one that I want to hit on. Road user charge generally refers to drivers using the roadways and being charged by the miles that they're driving. A lot of studies going on. Pennsylvania is part of the I-95 Corridor Coalition study that includes us, Delaware, and New Jersey. It's a pilot program. I think we're in phase 2 or phase 3 of that to gather data and learn some data from that. I know Utah is sort of one of the states that's stepping, I think, maybe both feet in the near future. You've had Oregon and Washington also have some pilot programs with that road user charge or the mileage-based user fee as well. So just to give you a sense of what we have heard in Pennsylvania in November of 2020 is when we launched the PennDOT pathways, and input was sought from the public on the alternative funding options being evaluated in the Pell study to obtain input regarding potential effects of the various alternative funding solutions. So we had nearly 6,000 people attend the online engagement opportunity. About 375 comments were received, and again, some of these numbers may be a little bit stale now. The result of this outreach and the completed analysis of the potential alternative funding options is going to be documented within the Pell document, and the Pell study will be made available for public comment in the spring of 2021, so right around the corner here. And just again, to give you a sense, next steps, just a timeline here, and I'm not going to hit on much of this, but I want to hit on the green part, that public comment period coming up. We're anticipating late April, early May, and then having that comment period open, obviously, for that 30 days or so, and we'll see what we learn from there. Obviously, we're going to continue to conduct the statewide outreach to low-income minority populations to understand the impacts of the alternative funding solutions to their particular communities as part of this ongoing effort. The results of that outreach and continued analysis certainly are going to be part of the final evaluation as well of the funding solutions, and will be also made available as part of that public comment document that we put out for the period here, late April into May. The one that, again, as I mentioned, it's gained, I'd say, most of the attention recently, both positive and negative, I would say, is the Major Bridge P3 initiative. One of the early initiatives advancing from the Pell is the proposed bridge tolling initiative. In November, PennDOT received approval from the P3 board to implement a bridge tolling throughout the state through this Major Bridge P3 initiative. Bridge tolling is designed to raise revenue in the next 2 to 4 years. So this is that shorter term, one of the shorter term solutions. And this is in order to address the state's growing backlog of major bridge replacement and rehabilitation needs. The bridges would use a public-private partnership, so a P3 contracting and delivery method. And through that P3 model, PennDOT can leverage private investment to help rebuild the critical bridges during a period with historically low interest rates and a very favorable labor market right now. This initiative can provide a dedicated source of revenue for the infrastructure improvements, could create significant savings over the life of the program, while ensuring the overall vitality of the state's transportation system and our economy. These next two slides, again, I'm not going to really hit on them. They both are motion graphics if you hop on the website that we have out there, and they look a whole lot slicker and cooler there. Not able to get the motion part of it as part of the PowerPoint. However, just to give you a quick sense, bridge tolling can provide funds to help repair or replace costly bridges without using PennDOT's current funding, which in turn would allow those funds to be used on other roadway maintenance, operations, and improvements. Tolling would be all electronic and collected by either EasyPass or license plate billing. The funds received from a toll would go back to the bridge where the toll is collected, which is an important aspect to help pay for the construction, the maintenance, and the operation of that particular bridge, along with the overall cost to administer the tolling program. And because these bridges are so significant, excuse me, in both needs and cost, we have to make them a priority either way. However, if we continue to take funds from our statewide transportation improvement program, other regional projects may not get done, causing long-term challenges to our state's transportation system. Again, we went through that a little bit with the 2021 program update, and we don't want to have to go through that any more with the future program updates. Again, skip right through that slide. So, proposed immediate solution, bridge tolling is certainly a proven mechanism that's used in Pennsylvania and across the U.S. Each year, nearly $22 billion of revenue is generated from toll facilities. Bridge tolling under the major P3 initiative can be implemented quickly because Easy Pass and toll collection systems already exist in Pennsylvania. We are authorized under current federal and state laws for tolling on bridges, and we can implement in 2 to 4 years and through a public-private partnership, and that can help accelerate the overall project delivery as well. We're getting there. Hang in there, gang. Couple more slides here. What we did here about tolling, in addition to the public and stakeholder engagement on the PEL, the Pathways team did survey Pennsylvania drivers on bridge tolling, and what we did here was it's important to invest funds from the tolls directly into the facility that generated the toll. And I mentioned that just a little bit on the previous slide. That certainly is our intent moving forward. Also, that we need to consider lower income communities, and that drivers generally prefer tolling over general tax increases. Bridge tolling, just a look at what it might look like. Tolling equipment is installed overhead over the roadway, which would record tolls electronically without slowing traffic, so helps you avoid backups, congestion, potential safety concerns. They also obviously can, as I mentioned, can be collected through Easy Pass, license plate, via an agreement that we would have with the Turnpike, with revenues then being sent to PennDOT. Since the Turnpike already has that mechanism and the back office in place, from an efficiency standpoint, we would have an agreement between the Turnpike and PennDOT. And then PennDOT will use the revenue to help pay for the bridge, freeing up funding for other projects statewide. Implementation of bridge tolling does ensure that the users, including out-of-state traffic, contribute fairly to the replacement and or rehabilitation of the bridges based on the use of that bridge. Just some benefits. I'm not going to hit on each one of them because we've sort of hit on a bunch of that. It does create a dedicated funding source for that bridge, helps to avoid any reallocation of traditional funding away from local regional projects to help pay for these larger interstate bridges. Again, I think we all get the overall gist of that. And then the one thing prior to, I guess, the February 18th, 17th, 18th announcement was everybody was interested. So what are the candidate bridges that we're looking at? This map shows the location. We are considering 9 candidate bridges for tolling through this major bridge P3 initiative. The one thing I want to highlight is how the bridges were selected. They're based on the following criteria. First and foremost, located on the interstate or expressway. In this case, all 9 are on the interstate network. The structures were of significance based on size, location, and cost to either replace or rehabilitate the structure. Structural conditions that warranted timely attention to enhance the safety and avoid disruption and community impacts if either a closure or weight restrictions were needed to be imposed. The revenue potential of the bridge location, again, based on general traffic levels, and also making sure we had a geographic balance across the state, and ones that could begin construction in that 2 to 4 year or that near term time frame to help give us a more immediate benefit. Again, just a quick list of, here's the list of the bridges, the PennDOT district that they're in. So SEDA-COG, none for you on this list of 9 candidate bridges, but just to, again, to give you a little detail. And as you can see, I mentioned earlier, average life of our bridges in Pennsylvania are 50 years. In this case, many of these are in that 60 to 60 plus year time frame as far as the overall age of the structure. Next steps for the major bridge P3 over the next year. We're going to continue to evaluate these candidate bridges through individual environmental documents, which are being prepared and or reevaluated for each bridge, again, depending where the bridge was in the design process or the project development process. Each project will advance with an evaluation on the impacts of tolling to the community, which will include impacts to minority, low-income populations, as well as any potential traffic diversion impacts from drivers to avoid the potential toll. So all that will be analyzed and continues to be analyzed as we move forward in looking at the program. The Pathways team, as well as the districts where there is a candidate bridge project, are certainly committed to a robust public and stakeholder engagement strategy as these studies are completed and working through the normal process. Again, next year, continue to look at and determine the toll rate. That's one of the last things that certainly will happen. Tolls will differ from site to site. Continue to look at the environmental and diversion route analysis as part of that. And we're also committed to making sure that we're working with our industry partners to advance that overall P3 approach and adapt our process based off the lessons that we've learned from the Rapid Bridge Replacement Program, or the RBR, which now we have all 558 of those bridges constructed. And that's the last slide, other than a thank you slide after this. But what I don't have in here and sort of wanted to hit on, certainly those are great links. There's a lot of information at that website, and if you have questions, utilize that centralized email. It goes right to the Pathways team, and then there is a hotline as well. But the website, unlike I'd say PennDOT's normal website, is got some, not to say that our website's bad, but the funding website that we've created to help guide this Pathways program is a really good site. It's almost a one-stop shop for anything funding related. So even if you're not overly interested in any of these programs, there's some good materials out there for future reference. But the late breaking news that I didn't pull into the PowerPoint itself is last Friday, so a week ago, the governor put out an executive order establishing the Transportation Revenue Options Commission. Also, as part of that executive order, indicated that the first meeting of that commission is to occur on or before March 25th. We do have a meeting teed up, or we'll have a meeting teed up of this commission on March 25th. So next Thursday, there will be the first meeting of this. Again, if you abbreviate it, TROC, or Transportation Revenue Options Commission, and that'll begin the process. It's really a fairly quick hitting, short. I think we're required, the commission is required by August 1st to have things wrapped up. And when that is wrapped up, that means a final report that's available for the public and for the legislative members. And certainly the task of this group is to I'd say work in parallel with the pathways and identify a bunch of potential solutions, resolutions to the current funding concerns. And I'll stop there and take questions.
All right, if no one's going to jump in with questions, I have just one that I think I understand, but I want to make sure that we were getting right. You were calling out that there would be an opportunity for public comment on this in the coming weeks. It sounds like that's going to be separate from the public comment opportunity that's currently open for the STC and the 12-year plan update.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and I should, although I saw it on your agenda, I should not fail to mention that there is an opportunity next Tuesday evening as part of the 12-year program update kicking off. That public outreach campaign begins next Tuesday evening at 6:30, and we have an online meeting that will kick that process off. And then, as you said, Jim, there'll be a separate public engagement involvement opportunity evolving around the pathways and the major bridge initiative as we get that Pell document wrapped up sometime the end of April, extending through May.
Are there questions from any of the other members or guests this morning? Anything else you'd like to hear from this? All right, I guess I would point out, I know it's come up in a couple of the local meetings and a couple of the studies. We're happy to see the CSVT project advancing. We do occasionally, as part of those discussions, have the question emerge of whether or not the CSVT bridge could be included in a future round of tolling for this. My impression on this has always been that that isn't a viable option because the CSVT is not part of the interstate system. So it sounds like it's not a viable part of this near-term set of solutions. Larry, can you confirm that? And then,
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Then,
Jim, I'll just say that this near term is truly focused on those 9 bridges, and as we work through the Pell and the study, we'll see if all 9 shake out at the end of all this as well as viable. And then certainly if we see that we're able to move forward and we see some success, then maybe, again, not near term, but longer term, maybe there's an opportunity to expand the overall program. But that would be years down the road in my sense.
And then another piece of this from earlier discussions, it sounds like for most of these bridges, you've identified the need for an operational improvement or an expansion in capacity that couldn't otherwise be funded. Do I have that correct? And can you maybe give an example of what that looks like?
I'm going to say for several of the bridges, they're what's called fracture critical. So that's one of the things that causes us concern and pause, because if you somehow lose one component of that bridge, you're going to lose the whole bridge. And then there are other areas, for example, the one that's being looked at in District 11 in Allegheny County on I-79 does have some expansion component to that, to the approaching and roadway. Example, a direct connection into I think it's the Southern Beltway project that the Turnpike has going on, which without that potential widening would create a safety concern with the potential weave and merge issue. South Bridge in Harrisburg, we do have some expansion going on that whole section, basically from I-83 if you're coming from south to north. As soon as you get across the South Bridge on I-83, from there up to the I-81 interchange, there's a fairly significant ongoing effort to, again, address some of those merge and weave issues, whether it's true expansion or however you want it. In most cases, I see it as a safety issue, but yeah, we do require to bump that out by an extra lane in most of that area. Also, I would note that's one of only a few interstates in the where you have a single, for some reason, the interstate's a single lane where you connect just past, if you're familiar with the area, at the Eisenhower interchange to continue 83 northbound. So.
I do have a comment. This is Katie from Clinton County. I was just digesting a lot of this information. You mentioned the impact of people avoiding the tolls to take local roads. And another impact would really be, I lived in New Jersey and New York for many years, and tolls were a fact of life. They're everywhere. And another impact would be increased use of public transportation where it's available. And I think that, I see that as a real positive, but it would also mean increased costs to PennDOT's public transportation side. I don't know, in the locations that you showed that are in the middle of the state, that's probably not going to happen, but in those urban locations, it certainly will. Because I always reached a point in my life where the tolls just got too expensive and I started to take the train or the bus or something else.
That's a great point. And certainly as we work through that Pell, just to give you an example, the one that's on I-95 in Philadelphia, certainly you would see some impact potentially, as you indicated, to public transit. Even the South Bridge, the I-83, I would say you likely could as well. So again, all those things as part of the Pell and the environmental documentation will be looked at. And I probably didn't hit on the diversionary part of that enough. If there, as we're going through the studies and we determine that there is significant diversion impacts, obviously the money that's generated from this P3 and through the toll would help to take care of making the necessary improvements to address any of that diversionary impact. So, if you have a local, I know the one potential is 322. I guess that would be not sure, I forget which bridge it is, one of the two out on I-80. And when you get off 322, there's a really tight turn. And obviously, we know that from winter when there's emergency issues and we have to close I-80, getting the trucks to make those turns is pretty difficult. So certainly that would be something that would need to be looked at and addressed as part of this overall process as well.
All right, any other questions or comments from us? Then hearing none, Larry, just let me say one more time, thank you for taking the time to share this with us, and please keep us posted and let us know how we can help in the discussions or stay involved.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Saylor, and thanks to everybody for participating today. Have a fantastic Friday and a great weekend, and stay tuned. Lots more to come in the coming months for sure on this and from the T-Rock. So greatly appreciate your attention, and I'm sorry I monopolized so much of your meeting this morning.
It's all good. It's good discussion. All right, that brings us up to item D on the agenda. The minutes from the January MPO meeting begin on page 14 of the packet. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes that should be considered at this time? And hearing none, can we have a motion for the adoption of the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Greg, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Steve Phillips, I'll move.
Sean, we're going to give that one to you since you're a little quicker on the draw. Thank you, Steve, for chipping in, though. If there is no further discussion, then all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, and then giving that just a moment, if there is anyone who is opposed, please signify at this time by saying nay. And is there anyone who wishes to abstain? Okay, then the minutes are accepted as presented. Thank you. That brings us up to item E, the TIP administrative modifications. Again, since we're working on a conference call instead of in the same room, we're going to just summarize these very quickly and call out a couple of highlights. The District 2 changes begin on page 21 of the PDF. And the first thing we'd call out is the Bucktail Bridge in Renovo. This is a local bridge project. The municipality went out and got a multimodal fund grant for the project. But when they actually got into the work, the concrete on the approach slabs just basically came apart when they were in the demolition phase. It took an additional $400,000 to $500,000 of work. They had to cast new approach slabs. And what we are doing with this change is reimbursing them 80% of that cost through the retroactive reimbursement program. This falls in line with what we did for Danville Borough when they had a similar multimodal fund project on a similar type of bridge. Again, it's these box beam concrete bridges a few years back. So I think we're staying in line with our precedent there. Jumping around, page 23, we're adding funds for another multimodal fund project, the River Road project in Mifflin County, so congratulations to them. Most of the other District 2 changes fall into two categories. Either we're moving funding flavors around, and that's usually putting more restrictive funds on a bigger project that we know qualifies for the use of those fundings, and that then frees up our more flexible flavors of funding for other projects. And a great example of that is the Peel Avenue project, a large local bridge in Clinton County. We've got 6 individual funding changes to that, and they're all pointed at that same end, trying to use the funds most efficiently.
Can I jump in on that? Did you hear the bid results yesterday?
I did not.
We had 14 bidders. 13 of the 14 came in below the estimate, and the winning bidder came in 24% below the estimate. Can you believe that?
I think that's outstanding. We know that the contractors are hungry, and I'm thrilled to see that happening on the projects where it benefits us.
Yep.
So I'm just going to take a quick note of that. That is terrific news, Katie. Thank you for sharing. All right, then the other type of moves that we're talking about, and there's a number of these, they're small changes either to address cost changes or to advance work. And maybe one of the good examples of that is there's a bridge up in Ravensburg State Park on 880, also in Clinton County. And we're calling out an increase for the survey and the final design, which just looking at the project makes sense to me because you've got the dam and the historic resources right through there. So we saw a number of those changes kind of percolating through. So with that introduction and that overview, is there anyone from the members that has questions for Mr. Mark Schultz about those or the other changes shown for District 2? All right, then hearing none, can we have a motion for the adoption of the approval of the administrative actions as presented?
Tim, this is Brad. I'll make that motion.
Brad, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
Mark and Mifflin.
Mark in Mifflin County, we'll give you the second. Thank you. Is there any further discussion required? Then hearing none, would all those in favor of accepting the administrative actions as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 If there are any opposed, would you signify by saying nay at this time? And then is there anyone that wishes to abstain? All right, then the administrative actions for District 2 are accepted as presented. Thank you. The administrative actions for District 3 start on page 26, and this is a wider mix of projects and changes. So just again, for a couple of quick highlights, we're funding construction impacts for a project that provides credits to offset MS4 impacts to the Chesapeake Bay. We've also got a project included that funds the installation of an ITS operation. It's putting in a camera that can be accessed either at the district or through the 511 program at the Danville interchange. And that's consistent with the regional operations plan we adopted back in 2018, 2019. On pages 27 and 29, we are adding design phases for a number of projects that will be done with district maintenance forces. We've talked about this before. We're putting a little bit of TIP funding in to actually do the design, but when it gets to the paving, instead of having a contractor do the project, it'll actually be the district forces that go out and cover that. And it's a terrific way to stretch the dollars a little bit further. So we're doing the design out of the TIP, but the maintenance, the actual work is funded out of other sources. On page 28, we're adding funds to repair a bridge strike for the I-80 bridge over Route 11. So it's just a continuing issue in the region. Page 29, I wanted to call out, we're documenting Union County's use of Act 13 funds on their T-374 bridge. And again, the decision of where to use those funds is made by the county. We just need to have the change listed on the TIP as a matter of recording it so that, you know, consistent with Act 13, we're using that to actually document where the funds are applied. And then the last change on page 30 moves funds around on the SR 54 safety project, addressing some of the design issues that have come up with that. But there's no change in the final project amount, and that is still listed and moving forward to construction. So with that really brief set of highlights, are there any questions for Mr. John Rank on the administrative actions for District 3? All right, then hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the administrative actions as they were presented?
So moved. This is Steve.
Steve, thank you for the motion. Terrific. Is there a second?
This is Sean. I'll second.
Sean, thank you for the second. Is there any further discussion required at this time? Then hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the administrative actions as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, if there are any opposed, please signify by saying nay. And are there any abstentions? All right, then hearing none, the administrative actions are accepted as presented. Thank you. A couple of bookkeeping notes here. Page 31 of the packet lists the projects that have been approved by the MPO pending the availability of funding. And once again, there are no changes to that list since February. There are no questions on those. It brings us up to item F, and that's an update on the status of the CSVT. Mr. Rank.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully winter is leaving us this weekend. At least literally it will be. Hopefully Mother Nature will pay attention and leave us as well into spring. Starting with the northern section, there's nothing to update from the last meeting. Just one keynote is as the weather gets better in the next few weeks, the paving operations will be recommencing and the truck traffic in the sites will probably start increasing as well as the pavement is being moved into the site. And again, we're still on track to open the northern section in 2022. For the southern section, final design, we have actually the draft construction plan set into checking. We'll be reviewing the plan set and making corrections and looking to then move on to the final set here in probably the later part of the summer. right-of-way plan, right-of-way, the plan has been finalized, and probably, if not already, negotiations have started. I got a question, I think, last meeting from Lincoln about how many right-of-way takes or parcels you want to say that we're looking at, and the answer I got is right around 75. And again, we'll be continuing coordination in other aspects of right-of-way as well. Utility coordination is continuing. We were looking to have the waterway and wetland permits to be this month. PDES is the DEP County Irrigation District at the end of April, and we are on track to let the first contract, the earthwork contract, in the fall, late fall, probably early winter of this year. And again, we are targeting a 2022 construction start date and a 2027 completion date for the southern section. And I will take any questions. Okay, Jim, I think I'm good. I'm gonna throw it back to you guys now.
All right, thanks, John. That brings us up to the Unified Planning Work Program update. The staff activity report for this starts on page 33. A couple of quick highlights under here. I don't know if they're all that well captured in the printed report, but some things we wanted to bring to your attention. This is generally the point in the year where CPDM, the program center, considers changes in the UPWP for year 2. So they've shared with us that they're not considering requests for supplemental planning funds due to availability, but they did remind us that many of the studies that we would put in for that are eligible for funding through the PennDOT Connects program on a rolling basis. So recent examples of that include the Danville area traffic study or the CSVT study, that impact study that we're cooperating with Lycoming County on. And just looking at some of the things that have been discussed in the long range plan or in other planning documents, some of the stormwater, watershed planning, H&H studies, some of the bike ped connectivity studies that we've been talking about, and for instance, the Middleburg traffic issue study that we coordinated with a technical assist session on back in November of last year. All of those would likely be eligible for PennDOT Connects funding. So our request to you as members is that if you're working on a similar study and you're looking around for funding, we'd ask you to contact staff about that within the next 2 weeks, just so it helps us understand what we're trying to get submitted. Again, it's a rolling program. If you miss that, it's not a crisis that eliminates you for future consideration. It's just, we're trying to get a handle on what our submission looks like. So within 2 weeks, if you can notify us if you're interested in putting something in, that would be helpful. Along with that, they are providing us as the transportation planning program with the chance to add $30,000 in base UPWP funding, provided we can match it. So barring any discussion to the contrary today, staff's going to confirm availability with our fiscal arm and submit the revised budget tables required for that, hopefully by the end of April. On the top of page 34, there's a very brief introduction to the recommendations of the Office of Management and Budget regarding the way that they designate metropolitan statistical areas, and a proposal by the Census Bureau to revise the way that they identify urban areas. Both proposals suggest raising the respective thresholds used from 50,000 to 100,000 persons. So in our area, that would impact the Bloomsburg-Berwick urban area. It would not be designated under the new census proposal, and under the OMB proposal, as a result, the the Columbia-Montour area would not be considered a metropolitan statistical area. So that also, from what we can see, applies to the Lycoming and Center County MSAs. from what we can see, the biggest fiscal impact of this is that, for instance, the Columbia, is that these areas, and they would no longer qualify under federal programs that rely on the MSA designation. So our best example is the CDBG program. They wouldn't be direct entitlement areas, and the allocations to communities like Bloomsburg and Berwick would be significantly decreased. To our knowledge, several MPOs, the NEPA MPO, the Center County MPO, and the CD program here at SEDA-COG, as well as the Pennsylvania Congressional Delegation, are submitting comments recommending that they leave the 50,000 person threshold in place for OMD. So there's a set of staff comments consistent with that. Starts on page 41 of the packet. Again, the notice states that they will not consider the impacts of other programs that use the MSA system to distribute funds. So our comments, we really try to restrict those to the points that they actually will consider. The technical impacts on the statistical use of the MSA designation, it makes for really dry reading. But what we're doing today is we are asking for your permission to submit these comments before the deadline tomorrow. For the census proposal that actually changes the methodology that they're using for identifying urbanized areas along with the threshold, we think the impact of that is a little bit more likely to be direct, but we also see that the changes are more technical, and I think we're going to need some more time to do our homework before we put together the actual comments. So I would also like to ask your permission to develop appropriate comments and submit those for that proposal. And if it's helpful, we are happy to share them with members for review and input before we would submit them. But I'm clear that that's before our scheduled May meeting. So is there any discussion on those comments or on those issues in particular? All right, then hearing none, can I ask for a motion that supports the submission of comments on these issues for the OMB and census proposals?
I'll make that motion. It's Katie.
Katie, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
This is Jack Kittle. I will second that motion.
Jack, thank you for the second. Is there any further discussion? Any questions from the group? All right, then hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 If there are any opposed, please signify by saying nay. All right, then as staff, we will move forward and submit the OMB comments provided before the deadline tomorrow, and we will develop the census comments and share them with the voting members ahead of submitting them, all of that prior to the May meeting. And then I guess the other thing I want to touch on is that along with the meetings listed in the staff report, we've continued to participate in the CSVT impact study. The most recent stakeholder meeting for that was just on this past Wednesday. And I'd say that the highlights from that are that we're on track for completion in July with a public and local official outreach session coming up in the June timeframe. I think we should be able to give you a much more substantial update of what it looks like the findings and recommendations are going to be come the May meeting. All right, Steve, can you walk us through a couple of the other items in this section, specifically the TA updates, the strategic plan update, and the performance measures report?
Sure, thank you, Jim. Our normal reporting here on progress related to the transportation alternatives projects from the 2018 round begins on page 39 of the packet if you're looking at it and printed, or you're looking at the PDF version, both the same, page 39. Just mention a few highlights here. We note those in bold text, either in the tables or some of the text there on these projects. So I'll just note that on top of page 40, the Clinton County Rail Trail, now the Bald Eagle Valley Trail, notice to proceed to the contractor was issued right around the time of our last meeting in January. So good progress there. And then the city of Lock Haven noted there in bold text, the construction was completed for their East Church Street streetscape project in January. So very good progress on those 2 projects in Clinton County. Additionally, the Brown Township streetscape project down in Reedsville area, Mifflin County, that project, the bids were opened in January, and you see the estimate there on the notice to proceed. So I'll just toss it out for the sponsors or district staff. Katie, maybe if you want to give us an update on Bald Eagle Valley Trail first, and then to the district if there's any updates on the Brown Township, and then John in District 3 for the Bull Run Greenway, if that project was advertised. So those 3 items. Katie, if you want to go first, please.
Sure. Bald Eagle Valley Trail River Crossing Project is underway. They're already out there cutting some trees, and the Mark Schultz, who's on the call today, a couple years back, engineered with Norfolk Southern, indicated to them the need for a railroad crossing signal, because the road that goes down to the bridge parking lot crosses it's a blind hill with railroad where the trains come through at about 40 miles an hour. So Norfolk Southern's doing that signal work. I think starting on March 15th they started, and our project is already underway out there on the west side of the river. The east side of the river part won't start until after some eagles move out of a tree.
Yeah, they're active. I see a lot of webcams for the hatchlings and all across the state.
Yeah.
So. Okay, thank you, Katie. And then for district staff, if there's an update on the Brown Township, if that's moving toward a notice to proceed, or if the bids looked good on that. And then also for Lewisburg Greenway Phase 1.
Hey, Steve, this is John Rake. I can comment on the Greenway Phase 1 in Lewisburg. We obligated the funds on the 12th of this month, and the project was advertised yesterday.
Okay, great.
Steve, Mark Schultz with District 2. Brown Township, there was an award of that project in February 4th. That award is proceeding towards a notice to proceed, and I believe they are looking at the need and interest to pull some work back in. They had some sidewalk work that they had to cut from the project because of a preliminary estimate. Because of the contractor's bid was good, they're looking to increase that contract and add some of that work back in. So at this time, they're finalizing that interest and working towards the notice to proceed soon.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Katie, John, and Mark for those insights and updates. Shows good progress on those 2018 projects, and glad to see they're coming to fruition. So kind of on the heels of that, I know at the last meeting we mentioned we were anticipating that PennDOT would be opening up a statewide solicitation for a new round of candidate projects in the spring, summer. We heard a little bit more definitive there that it's likely going to be a late June solicitation. So this would be for any area projects across the state, not just the large MPO areas of over 200,000 population that can kind of distribute their own funding. So this is the any area funds, and likely going to be a solicitation, late June of 2021. And we're expecting that to be about $18 million, probably statewide. So again, as you're speaking with municipalities or other candidate sponsors, feel free to mention that, have them start doing some of their additional homework and coordination, maybe with their engineers, the design plans maybe they already have, or beginning those additional public support and analysis that might be needed to prepare an application. So as part of this, I know we've shared in the past, we were part of the work group to retool, redesign the application and offer those comments. So that'll be one thing that hopefully this round will be more user-friendly. And it also will bring in a mapping capability that folks don't have to generate their own maps. They can do it within the system. And it'll also automatically score them for environmental features based on the location. So that'll be a nice upgrade and some additional things there. But as part of that, PennDOT will look to do some training on the new online application And of course, the guidelines will be updated for this round as well. So as we get more details, we'll share that with you. And then hopefully, come late June, there'll be a solicitation for projects. I would think it'd probably be, at least a 2-month window, hopefully, to apply. But any questions on the Transportation Alternatives Program? Okay, if there are none, the other items that Jim referenced, I'll hit. In your packet on page 44 is the MPO Strategic Plan Annual Implementation Progress Tracker. And this is part of the fruits of the 2019 MPO Strategic Plan. Most of you were involved with that, setting the vision and then identifying action items for the plan. And our consultant team from Gannett Fleming gave us a nice template to track this progress. So annually since 2019, we've been doing this. And you can see there are updated comments are on the far right, starting on page 44, for those different action items that are tied to funding, performance measurement, resiliency, modernization, traffic incident management, multimodal aspects, transit, bike ped, and so forth, and then related to the CSVT. So if you have questions about those, feel free to reach out to us, or if there's additional areas you want to see us collaborate with you on, tied to some of those action items within your counties, municipalities, feel free to let us know, and we can hopefully support you in that and get those updated for the reporting next year. All the items you'll see included there, some of the highlights since March of 2020 that the staff has been engaged on. Any questions on that at the moment? Okay, if not, I'll tick through the other item Jim referenced is the Long Range Transportation Plan Performance Measures Report. That annual report that we do each spring starts on page 55 of the packet. As part of that, we had gone and hit various data sets and downloaded those to generate the charts that you'll see within the report, and then updated some of the text there as well to highlight some trends or changes. So in the interest of time, I won't really dwell on any of those. You'll see it covers a lot of the bridge, pavement considerations and indicators, and our other localized things like the LTAP program, engagement on that, things we have in there for job numbers, trips on the area transit agencies, and so forth. So that all is contained in there. We'll get the update report posted to our website coming off the heels of this meeting, and make sure that's available for public consumption. But essentially this ties to the federal statutes for performance measurement, but it was based off of our 2016 long range plan. So there have been some changes with the federal legislation since then, and our new long range plan will capture some of that, what we've been adopting on an annual basis for performance measures for pavement and bridges, for safety factors, and also for system performance. So we're going to look to retool our reporting process for next spring, hopefully make it more visual, easier for stakeholders to consume and understand performance measured trends, because measuring performance obviously is a very essential tool for managing performance and providing us necessary information for better outcomes and strategies, hopefully. So we'll look at that. We're going to maybe consider the State Transportation Commission Transportation Performance Report, how they do a scorecard for that, to maybe follow that model and make it more visual and easier to grasp in the future, and maybe on a website to provide additional charts and information if people want to pursue that in the future. So in the interest of time, I'll just highlight that a couple things will more than likely come out of this. The linking plan NEPA, since that's been changed, our plans and updates section of the normal reporting, some of the jobs, things there we have for manufacturing, construction, warehousing, mining, quarrying, oil and gas jobs, and then the table 38 that misses some of the updated performance measures with the federal legislation. We'll revise that going forward. So other things that maybe we'll add will be the total value of the federal obligated projects by federal fiscal year, and the transit performance measure, since that's a change now to reflect that with the federal reporting. So more to come on that. We'll capture things with this updated long range transportation plan for 2021. and hopefully have a more visually appealing document in the future that the public can grab a hold of, and also our other stakeholders to understand our performance and the different trend lines. So any questions on that? Okay, well, thank you for your time, and that information's all out in the pack, and if something comes to mind, just let us know afterward. Thanks, Jim.
All right, Mr. Keough, I think that brings you up for item H, the LRTP update.
Okay, let me share my screen here. If someone would kindly let me know if you can see the title slide, please.
Confirmed.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a relatively jam-packed agenda today, so I'll try to keep things moving along as well. The update on the LRTP project. And be two parts today. I'll do most of the content, and then at the end, we'll be adding Michael Baker in to talk about one aspect of the project that they've been developing as well, and give you a demo of that. So go right into things here. You can see the highlighted sections of the schedule and where we are right now in the project. We're coming down the home stretch for sure. The largest box there is where we've been concentrating the last couple of months. And we're well down on that. What we did hope to have for you today is another version released to you of the draft plan itself. We're running a little bit late on that. We're getting close to being able to do that, but we're not going to be at that point today. What we do want to present is one aspect of that will move the process along, and that we want to get some feedback from you for, in the form of a story map that is essentially an executive summary as well for the draft plan. And Michael Baker will lead us through that a little bit later. The other aspect to point out that I'll talk more about is the second round outreach. We basically completed the first round outreach. I'll give you some results for in a minute here. We have scheduled coming up here next week. It'll be an online meeting with the agency coordination group for state agencies out of Harrisburg that will be presenting some of the aspects of the LRTP document and areas of interest related to projects, particularly for other state agencies. So again, that's scheduled. It's actually Wednesday next week. We'll be doing that online. Give you a little bit more update on that in a second. The first round of the public outreach included meetings with human services agencies and groups, and primarily two main groups that we conducted online meetings for, what's called the PrEP Partners. Was conducted on February 2nd, and then we met with Greater Susquehanna Valley United Way members, their Basic Needs Task Force, on February 17th. And I won't read all of the bullets in the interest of time here as we go on here, but we got good feedback from them, especially strong interest in workforce transportation aspects of that, related to carpooling, van pooling, on-demand services. A lot of that information from input is being incorporated into the LRTP document. There's going to be a significant section about all of those aspects of transportation and what the MPO is about. I'll also mention that I think as this was conducted during the time when the online survey and GIS-based hub site was open to anyone to provide feedback, the support was expressed that the stakeholders were appreciative of having that. I think that worked really well to get some response back from them on that too. And on that website, what we weren't ready to give you last time when we had the meeting before is information on the survey that was included as part of the site. What we did go through last time, I think, was showing some of the mapping and aspects of presentation of projects. What I'd like to run through today is some of the results from the online survey that was collected and put together, particularly with the assistance of the Michael Baker team. So, and Catherine Wild as well in supporting this and putting it on the SEDA-COG website. We received over 200 responses from the survey in about a month's time. It just wound up in early March. You can see the distribution from counties and other places of those who responded to the survey. This number of expected responses was pretty consistent with surveys that have been conducted through the STC. So finished about where we expected it to. We wanted to pull out some of the significant things that came from the survey. We won't be going through all of it, but things that are of, I think, significant interest. As you know, we talked about this, but you'll see it and have already in even the first draft of the plan when it came out, of some information devoted to what the impacts of the COVID situation have been over the last year. You certainly heard about that from Mr. Shiflett, what some of the long-range, long-lasting, significant statewide impacts are of what's happened over the last year. And we directed a few questions in the survey to address things that were more relevant to our local area. So you can see some of the results here. Most people feel that COVID has had an impact on work location, and our questions were primarily oriented toward working at home, or what the circumstances are of transportation and being able to go back to work, whatever. So almost 2/3 of the respondents have been working at home due to the COVID situation. And if you add the numbers up here, a very definite yes, at least part-time, if not full-time. Almost 40% of the respondents indicate that they are planning to continue working from home after the pandemic's over. If you add in the 31% that people are unsure, it's a much higher percentage than that. And one thing we just did a little research on here along with it is there's been some national surveys, as you might guess, that have started to come out in the last couple of months or so of similar questions for people. And the surveys that I've seen are generally in the order of maybe 65 to 70% of people are expecting to keep working from home in some regard after the pandemic is over. So a significant number of people are planning to stick to their current situation, which again will change things compared to pre-pandemic period. Some of the other items of interest were asked related to these national surveys, but one of the things that was significant was a lot of this depends on the quality of broadband and internet access, as you might expect. So that's certainly something significant for central Pennsylvania. On to some other aspects. We asked about modes of travel, some more typical questions that have been asked in prior times for LRTP. You can see the results here. I think one thing to point out is that the carpool results here maybe were a little bit lower than might be expected. And if you compare that to some of the census mode share data, which has that, I think, probably second on the list of information. So carpool may be a little bit low on here, but nothing extremely unusual or typical, I suppose. Not a lot of public transit, public transportation, obviously in the area, so that shows up lower. The one thing I'd like to point out on this slide, you can see the number of vehicles by household, but the more interesting question, I think, at least to me, is would you walk or bike more frequently if you had more facilities available for that? And the majority of the people responded affirmatively for that. That's another reason, I think, for highlighting some of the active transportation project work that's been going on. First of all, from the Mid-Susquehanna area active transportation group that Catherine is involved with, but also going back to the project list, the discretionary projects in the long-range transportation plan, about 35% of them that are included in the list are active transportation projects. So definitely a trend, definitely of interest to respondents to the survey, and I think we'll be able to reflect that in the LRTP results. These are corridors of opportunity. We went over that, I think, the last time, what we're calling corridors of opportunity, where we would really like to focus potential project work. And these results are classified into 4 categories here. One thing that Jim Saylor was mentioning to me is that was perhaps expected that Danville area would show up in the congestion list, which is not the case here, at least for the top 3. But that may be because there was lower participation from Montour County compared to some other areas. So maybe that has to be taken with a grain of salt. But I think results expected pretty much from what you see here. Another question was the impact of projects and reducing the congestion, traffic congestion was probably the expected result, I think, especially because of increased traffic focused in certain areas. Safety has generally been the #1 choice in previous surveys and previous plans, but traffic congestion shows up #1 in this case. And that pretty much reflects what the survey results or the emphasis is for the most recent update of the MPO strategic plan. On funding, I think again expected road pavement related to repairing, restoring, reconstructing, maintaining roadways, #1. The traffic flow, traffic volumes using technology to improve traffic flow maybe is up a little higher on the list compared to past times, which I think is consistent with the traffic congestion question that we brought up before. So not too many surprises there, but these were the top 5 number related to funding. Safety improvements, again, pretty straightforward. I think #1, making intersection improvements would be a logical result of what people feel is most important for safety. #3, maybe is worth pointing out, improving access to public transportation. I think goes along with continued emphasis on active transportation and maybe non-traditional ways of providing transportation solutions. Okay, I mentioned the ACM meeting coming up next week. We've got some goals that, in addition to presenting some of our information, that we'd like to accomplish in getting feedback from the various groups that are there. On the right, you can see the attending and sponsoring groups that have been invited to the meeting. At this point, it looks like perhaps 40 people will attend. We've been part of some other ACM meetings to see what's going on, and it does seem that there is a little bit higher attendance in the online version of this meeting in some other places, and we'll see what happens with our meeting as well, but it may actually be a bit of an improvement for people being able to attend. We want to open up the questions for the group to consider about the databases and information we should be looking at. Are there things that we're missing there? Other sources that maybe are new or planned or that we have not consulted as much? What mitigation opportunities are recommended for some of the potential projects? And are there other agencies or other groups that we should be talking to at the regional level? So we're hoping that those will be the primary areas where we get some meaningful feedback from the groups that are attending. This is largely going to be focused on the 12-year plan projects. We had a pre-meeting with the coordination groups for the agency coordination meeting, and it was recommended that we do some further analysis with the full slate of 12-year plan projects in our region. And at the lower left there, you can see there's 370 of those projects that are classified according to the list. Where you look at the map here, they're well spread out over the MPO area. There's some clustering that's pretty evident even at this scale. We took these specific projects, ran them through GIS, and at the recommendation of the ACM group, Catherine ran a 250-foot buffer distance around each of the projects. There's a lot of projects here. These are all classified as asset management projects. These are not the discretionary projects that we've talked about. And so this was the emphasis for preparing for the ACM meeting and what we'll be showing. Some of the results, some of the summary results are, these are the total number of impacts for these projects. And one thing that may be a little surprising to some folks is that agricultural impacts show up as number one, not necessarily historical properties or archaeological sites. You know, flood projects, there's a lot of flood and resiliency projects. Environmentally sensitive projects show up on the list here. So quite a wide range of things. But another way to look at the data as well is to present the percentage of projects that impact each sector. What this is basically showing is that each project can have more than one impact. So by this measure, it's actually the historical properties that have the highest percentage. Agricultural impacts are still high, environmentally sensitive, flood resiliency show up high. And so this kind of leads into what I think the majority of the attention at the ACM meeting will be on next week. And that's some of the results of doing the analysis. And what I'd like to do just quickly here is run through about 5 or 6 slides from different counties and for different impacts. So the first slide here is showing some flood and resiliency impacts over in Columbia County between Berwick and Bloomsburg. So we looked at all of the 12-year plan projects and were able to identify some areas where we particularly saw some clustering or some large numbers of projects in a relatively small area or a corridor like this. This result you can see on the legend shows 100-year floodplains, Act 167 watersheds where there's hydric soils, and some hazard mitigation assistance program properties. This matches up with other initiatives that have been going on. For example, in this case, it would be the Bloomsburg Lime Ridge Stormwater Study. It's just an example of showing where areas of concern are, where there's some clustering, and aspects of projects where certain characteristics, in this case, flood and resiliency factors, have to be included in project evaluation and prioritization, funding, things that have to have attention. Over in Juniata County, in the southwestern part, south central part of Juniata County, there are some projects that are entirely bridge related here, but have impacts or are affected by waterway and hydric soils. So, even though it's a very rural part with not necessarily a tremendous amount of traffic, for example, there's a significant number of bridges in a small area that these factors have to be looked at. So again, give you a chance just to look through the legend if you want to see that, but these are areas that jump out to us.
Don, are you talking about impacts of the existing project that you want to improve upon? Or what do you mean when you say impacts? Or are you talking about when whatever this project is finished, are you talking about impact mitigation is what my question is.
Okay, I've got a couple other comments about mitigation coming up here, but this may be a good place if Jim would like to jump in with a comment more relevant probably than I'd be able to make on it. If you would, Jim.
Sure. So what the ACM group asked us to do was a buffer analysis. So what we're looking for is potential impacts. What we're really seeing in this slide is that those bridges line up over the hydric soils, or they're over one of the particular stream categories. So the idea is that you know ahead of time, before you go into the PennDOT Connects process or the scope and field view meeting, that's one of the things we should be worried about. And the idea is that as you get that into the project at the earliest possible stage, and it opens the opportunity as wide as possible to maybe not just look at it bridge by bridge, if we're in the same corridor 3 or 4 times over 5 years, but to maybe look at it in a more holistic perspective and decide there's something we can do that costs less money that would offset the impacts of all these projects. Let's start and do that instead of doing something that's less effective and more constrained for each of the projects. So what we're hitting with this analysis is this is where we think the potential impacts are, and we're hoping the discussion with this group starts pointing us at maybe some better solutions than we'd find if we just went through it on a project by project basis.
Got it. Thank you.
And Katie, just to add on to that, we got some comments back already before the ACM meeting, I think from Fish and Wildlife Service, about some potential additional data layers that might be useful to look at or include in these kind of analyses. Perhaps to consider wetland banking. There might be some credits left that can be used on projects like this. Maybe the possibility of looking at the MS4 mitigation idea with it. So these are all things taking forward, I think, how the projects can be approached. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay, and kind of sticking with you, our next slide is Clinton County. And what we're showing here are overlays of agricultural easements, prime farmland soils, soils of statewide importance. And this is maybe an example of, well, things have to be looked at on a project level. If you sort of widen the scope out and look at a bigger picture approach to this, other things maybe show up here. It has to be emphasized again, I think, just how rural most of our counties are. But when you look at this part of Clinton County, you see projects that are proposed, not just bridge projects, but highway projects and other projects as well, that really have a significant relationship with agriculture and soils impacts. So, you know, in this part of Clinton County, there are old order communities. That certainly applies in a lot of other parts of the MPO area. And these are the sort of things perhaps that need to be, you know, considered or at least included for analysis and show up at a scale like this. There's archaeological and historic properties implications in different areas. This is a zoom in on the Danville area and just north of Danville, showing archaeological sites and historic properties in this part of Montour County. There's a lot of particularly long linear type facilities that are related to archaeological and historic significance, I guess. A lot of old Indian paths, trolley lines, there's old canals. Route 54 basically follows the Muncie-Mahoning path here, if I understand that right, in this area. We've gotten some comments. Probably we'll get some more from the State Historic Preservation Office about how these projects are impacted and how they have to be aware of historic and archaeological properties. You can see there's a lot of projects that fit into this picture right here. Okay, and the last one is, I think, fairly evident, especially for people that have been watching the CSVT project, is waste site impacts. And this is part of Union County along the US 15 corridor, and where the CSVT is going through numerous waste storage sites that you know, are very clustered. And this is certainly a corridor of opportunity for us, the US 15 corridor, and all the impacts and implications of the CSVT and how that will be affected. So lots of potential 12-year plan projects in this area and concerns that have to be looked at in this sense. So all through this is a theme, I think, of not only through the analysis, but then identifying what opportunities there are for mitigation, for programmatic mitigation. I mentioned wetland banking already. There are preservation projects for historic bridges, a number of historic bridges in the MPO counties. There are more funds being allocated to that. There is, if I understand this right, there's a new statewide program that will be oriented toward preserving the historic metal truss bridges in the state. But covered bridges, there's certainly a number of those in the MPO counties as well. So we want to open up this question to the ACM group also about what else we should be exploring, if there's anything else or paying some attention to. There's also, I think this time around on the LRTP, there's a few more new and unique opportunities and issues that have arisen just in the last few years. We mentioned the MSATC, a lot more emphasis on active transportation, obviously. It's the Dirt and Gravel Roads Program. There are a number of stormwater studies that are being conducted, or similar kinds of studies. I mentioned the Bloomsburg to Lime Ridge study already. There's a new one planned to start in Shamokin, which these all require more collaboration with other agencies as well. Clinton County has had some watershed-wide studies. There's the Lewisburg Market Street study going on. The MPO is working with them for implementation of projects. And on the MSATC, just a couple of examples, there are new initiatives or new ideas for projects or work for areas like providing additional access for to the river or boat access. This is sort of out of the traditional transportation box in a sense, but it's something that needs attention moving forward, and I think it's just going to keep growing. So these are things that you'll be seeing in the strategic plan that are mirrored in some of the discussion with the ACM group next week, and we'll, I think, probably be disseminating the notes and main things that come up out of that meeting next week and providing that back to everyone. So just as a reiteration with the next steps and the milestones, there you see the ACM meeting. We had wanted again to try to be able to disseminate the next version of the full draft plan, but we would like to get some feedback in the next couple of weeks from the group in general, and then the steering committee, we've scheduled a meeting on that for April 1st on feedback for particularly what we'll be showing you already as kind of the summary or overview of the strategic plan through a story map approach. The rest of the dates are through May and June. We're looking at final plan adoption for June 25th. We have a virtual public meeting to come up as well, and another public comment period until that time. So we could stop here for a second if anyone has any additional comments, but for otherwise going on, we want to turn it over to the Michael Baker team to show the work that they have been doing with LRTP summary approach, which is primarily going to be presented through a story map that will have GIS aspects to it. But this is essentially kind of, right now, an interim mechanism to get further feedback from you. But we want to mention and emphasize that it also builds on what you're going to see today in several directions. In several aspects. We think it can be a springboard for the development of a potential continuing dashboard to show transportation information. We mentioned that before. Steve was talking about the updating for the performance measures. That's a typical thing that would be included in a site like this that we hope to include. I said this can serve as kind of an executive summary, at least a visual executive summary for the LRTP when it's completed. And the goal is this is not a one-off development. This is something to be continually updated, expanded, and we're excited about the ability to show information like that. So I will stop here for my part of things. Just again, ask if anyone has any questions, and then we'll turn it over to the Michael Baker team. Okay, hearing none. If Brian, I'm not sure who's driving it, but if you're ready to share your screen, we'll move to that. Brian, are you there?
Looks like he might have had to drop off, Don. I know we were backed up against another conflict for him.
Okay.
So, do you think you could take us through, did they share a slide version of this with you? Could you hit some quick highlights from that?
Yeah, I can do that. So apologies for that, but it is a long meeting today. We know that, and we'll do our best to just summarize what they were planning to show as well. I'll bring that up here. Okay. Okay, they have the new slides up.
They're showing, yes.
Okay. Um, go down here. These are screenshots basically of what the site it looks like right now, and different pages that you can see. And we're not showing it as a live demo, so you can't see all of the aspects of it. But there will be, as you can see on the ribbon across the top, several different areas that you can go to. Background and introduction, strategic directions, major trends and finding, and so on. Corridors of opportunity are there. So this is an overview of the MPO area. This is a aspect of the strategic directions for the MPO. The boxes over on the left side actually allow you to click and go in and see some additional documentation about what the directions are. Been presenting some of the major trends and findings. Here's an example of what some of the socio-demographic characteristics are for population here from the ACS survey, for example. Here's population age 65 and older. I should also say that on the actual site, it's interactive in the sense that you can go over to the map on the right side, hover over any particular area, and you'll see information for that particular unit or project or whatever the information is that's being shown. Households for with low vehicle access here, for example. Employment. On the transportation system, this is an example of vehicle miles traveled, daily vehicle miles traveled. Again, on the actual website. If you are interested in Northumberland County data, you can move over a particular year, hover over it, and it'll show you the actual number as well. Same for roadway conditions. This shows pavement with poor International Roughness Index, IRI data for the MPO. Here's roadway safety information, fatalities, serious injuries, non-motorized crashes, total vehicle crashes. Here's more information on the number of poor condition bridges, 2015 compared to 2020. This is a good indicator that the number of poor condition bridges in the last 5 years has gone down significantly. There'll be information shown here about public transportation and ride sharing options, if you're interested in that. Active transportation projects, in this case showing bicycle routes and trails. Then what we had shown you before previously is some of the online work that's been done on GIS for the corridors of opportunity. So this is an example of showing both of them together, the asset management projects and the discretionary project list. Again, it's interactive. You can choose those categories over on the left side if you'd like to see freight generators or safety information, for example. And you can toggle back and forth between the asset management projects and the discretionary project list. You have revenue forecasts built in, and all this information is drawn from, is or will be in the actual LRTP report document. Public participation and stakeholder outreach, summary of what's been done, or in this case, what's still to come in some of these areas for providing feedback for the LRTP. This is the project listing, again, showing the two different kinds of projects where you can click or hover and get information. and then a learn more ability to go into the main MPO website or go on to the LRTP main hub site. So the dates that I showed for the next couple of weeks or so to get some feedback from you on what's presented here. Any feedback that you have for us would be greatly appreciated by ourselves and the Michael Baker team. We'll be sending out I don't think we've sent out the link to it yet, but we will be doing that. So we will look forward to getting feedback and any comments or suggestions that you might have about how this information is presented through this story map approach. Okay, I think that's the end of what we were going to see from Michael Baker, but hopefully you got a good idea of what this site will look like then. So that's ends the LRTP information this morning, unless anybody has comments or questions. Okay, if not, we appreciate your help and assistance as we move into the home stretch here, and we're looking forward to moving on and
Hey, Don, good morning. This is Matt Smoker. Do you mind if I make a comment?
Sure, please do.
It took me a little bit to find the unmute button. Hey, I just want to congratulate you guys and the work of SEDA-COG and the staff and everyone on the committees that put this together. It's very comprehensive. There's a lot of data in there, but you presented it in a way or multiple ways, whether it was visual or through narrative or through pictures, that really kind of conveys that information that makes it, I think, really user-friendly for people that will be using the long-range plan, and it builds a solid foundation to build upon in the future. So I just want to say congratulations, and all the hard work and effort is certainly paying off and is recognized.
Well, thank you. We all appreciate your comment. And you know, our main goal with this is that even though this is the kind of project that only gets done periodically, it should be something that is looked at and updated and nurtured, I think is a good word, on a continual basis. And some of these tools that are new this time that we've been putting together, and with the assistance of particularly Catherine and Michael Baker, that's the goal. It's designed to be able to keep it moving along, support other initiatives that the MPO has to take care of. And then by the time we get down the road another 5 years, we've already got some good tools and a good place to start when the next version takes place. So that's the intent, and I think we're seeing good success with it so far. Okay, thanks very much, and certainly look forward to any further comments or feedback you have for us, and we'll keep things moving along.
All right, I know we're running a little bit longer than usual this morning. We've got just a couple of quick items, quick hitters left on the agenda. Steve, would you take us through item I, the 2023 12-year program public participation update?
Sure. Jim and Larry had touched on this earlier, but I know we've shared with the MPO members as well. PennDOT's press release, some fact sheets, and other information on the 2023 12-year program update. Information in your packets starts on page 86. And so each year the State Transportation Commission issues the Transportation Performance Report, and then also a solicitation for public comment. There's a survey that can be taken by the public. It's out there on the website links that are provided until April 14th. General things can be noted, responses to the questions that are posed, and then an ability to go through on the map, identify potential project locations or transportation needs that exist. So I encourage everybody to do that. The state has a goal you can see on their website of how many survey responses they would like to see completed, and I think they're about 20 to 25% toward that the last I had seen. So that's out there, and there's an online public forum, as Larry mentioned, next week on March 23rd. Encourage you to hit that. You can register in advance or just join it through Facebook Live or other means and participate. You'll hear from the Secretary, State Transportation Commission, and questions can be submitted in advance or during the meeting, and those will be responded to. We've promoted this to the MPO, to municipalities in the region, and we've also used our social media feeds. So hopefully we'll see good participation again. The last couple rounds have been pretty substantial, and we'll see those kind of clusters like Don was showing earlier on the 12-year program project maps. We'll see a lot of those probably populated, those main corridors, with the feedback as well from the public. We'll hopefully get the results May, June, and we'll work toward a draft tip submission to PennDOT Central Office probably late in the year, December. And then next year we'll be in the adoption mode, probably for June or July of 2022 to adopt the 12-year program. So appreciate everybody with your normal participation in that, and the role you play with identifying these needs, and also what Catherine's going to touch on with the local bridge prioritization process. So I'll stop there unless there's questions.
All right, if there's no questions, then that brings Catherine up for the next two items, local bridge prioritization and the active transportation committee update.
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody. Quick verbal update on both of these, did not include anything in the packet today on either of them. For the bridge process, if you happen to miss last meeting, we did walk through a brief presentation on what is included with the process and everything going along with it. If you missed that, we'd be happy to provide that to you. As of now, all of the counties have their meetings scheduled over the next few weeks. As we have those meetings, I will be starting the GIS analysis portion of that and getting everything put into the Decision Lens software. And coming in May or June, you'll be receiving a survey from me as the next step. So thank you, all of you, for your participation so far, and we look forward to the meetings coming up to discuss the priorities. Does anybody have any questions specifically on the bridge process? All right. Quick update on the active transportation side of things. We held our funding workshop on February 24th, and it went well. We had some good representation from PennDOT, DCD. Steve was also on there talking about the LTAP information, and we had a gentleman from traffic planning and design also hop on there to share some of his inputs. That went well. And we also polished off some adjustments on our policies and procedures document. Our next meeting will be May 19th. And I did want to throw in there, we do have an intern working with the transportation department at SEDA-COG right now. Her name is Olivia Zavril. She's from Bucknell. Unfortunately, she has class during this time slot, so she wasn't able to hop on for the meeting. But she is also working on adding to our sidewalk inventory for the region as another active transportation item. Does anybody have any questions on the active transportation side of things? All right, I think that is everything from my side.
All right, then that leaves us with just a couple more items on the agenda. Under the member forum, the usual items and links are included in the packet under item L. We did have one thing that didn't make the deadline that we wanted to bring to your attention. It appears that Congress is opening the door to go back to an earmark system for the pending highway reauthorization bill. There are limits and conditions on this. It's limited to 1% of the discretionary funding and limited to 10 submissions per congressperson, and requires a letter from a local sponsor, whether that be a municipality, nonprofit, or local agency. There does not appear to be a clear timeline. What we've seen is that, quite frequently with reauthorizations, they'd already be going through their hearing process in March. In this round, they are delaying that a little bit. They want to see the full budget proposal from the administration. So the best we can say is that the deadlines for this may be as early as March and as late as June. We do have a link to a summary of this. The best one I've seen so far is from the National League of Cities, and it just lays out a couple of these criteria and what we understand about it. I guess our request to members is that if you are going to pursue this and work towards earmarks on projects that are of particular value in your region, please communicate with us on that and let us know. There are some requirements in this in terms of what stage the project is in. If there is a funding plan together for the non-earmarked portion of the cost, then we may be able to help you pull that information together if you're working towards a submission. So as I said, we'll provide a link to that in the follow-up email to the meeting. We just wanted to get that onto your radar if it wasn't there already. At this point, I'd like to open it up to any of the members or the attendees if you'd like to provide an organizational update, or if there's just things you want to bring up for the good of the general order.
Hey, Jim, this is Matt Smoker. I was going to touch upon that, but I think you did a better job of explaining the process right now. It's being laid out for considering earmarks moving forward. But there's also a whole lot of other discussions happening in Washington right now. There's talk of an infrastructure bill. There's certainly talk about reauthorization proposals, which could be separate from an infrastructure bill, as well as there's going to be a lot more guidance and policies coming out from the new administration regarding some of their top priorities, which include climate change, resiliency, and equity in transportation. As information comes available through federal highways, I'll certainly pass that along to PennDOT and to all the MPOs across the state. But as you alluded to, sometimes other state or national organizations have a pretty good fix on what's going on, whether that's AASHTO, MPO kind of planning organizations, and so forth. So together we'll keep everyone focused moving forward.
Terrific, thanks. Anything else? Anything else members would like to bring in? Questions? All right, then hearing none, I make the time as 11:37, and we will consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you everyone for your attention.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Jim, everybody.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.